peace negotiations between the Holy Roman Empire and the Ottoman Empire were very difficult, largely because the French King Louis XIV intervened in them. The fact is that it was beneficial for the French that a significant part of the army of the Holy Roman Empire was tied up in battles against the Ottoman Empire and could not be transferred to the north to fight against French troops in the War of the League of Augsburg. While negotiations were underway, the Transylvanian Principality, due to the weakening of the influence of the Ottoman Sultan, decides to come under the protection of the Holy Roman Empire. In this situation, it became obvious that it would not be possible to conclude peace on acceptable terms, and therefore, in 1689, Sultan Suleiman II arrived in Sofia at the head of his army, after which he began to move towards Belgrade, planning to regain control of the city. Having reached the outskirts of Belgrade, the Ottomans found a small Austrian army, which, not daring to join the battle, was retreating. The Sultan ordered to pursue the enemy. This decision turned out to be a fatal mistake. During the pursuit of the enemy, the Ottoman army fell into a trap and was subjected to powerful artillery fire at night. Having suffered serious losses, the Ottomans were forced to abandon their artillery and begin a retreat towards Sofia. This was taken advantage of by the Austrians, who in September launched their own offensive, during which they managed, breaking the resistance of the local garrison, to capture the city of Nis. Planning to open a second front, a small Austrian army invaded the territory of Wallachia and began to move towards Bucharest, but thanks to the joint actions of the Ottoman troops and the army of the Wallachian prince, the Austrians were driven out of the territory of Wallachia. The Ottomans were in a rather difficult situation, so the Sultan was forced to act. First of all, he returned the position of Grand Vizier Fazıl Mustafa Pasha, and also began to hastily assemble an army, mobilizing the Muslim population in all parts of the Ottoman Empire. By the beginning of 1690, the Ottoman Empire managed to gather a huge army and launch an offensive, planning to recapture the previously lost territories. Already in September 1690, the Ottoman army managed to regain control over the city of Nis, after which the Ottomans continued their offensive along the Danube River. Having reached the outskirts of Belgrade, the Ottoman army began the siege of the city. Despite the resistance of the Austrian garrison, on October 8 the city fell into the hands of the Ottomans. Meanwhile, the Second Ottoman Army laid siege to the city of Osijek. The Ottomans planned to continue along the Danube River in order to unite with the besieging army of Osijek and continue towards Buda, but heavy rains began, and the Ottomans were forced to postpone further advance. After the loss of Belgrade, the Austrians began to hastily gather forces to recapture the city. In turn, the Ottoman vizier perfectly understood the plans of the enemy, so in 1691 he set out to meet the advancing Austrian army, without waiting for the arrival of the Crimean Tatars, in order to catch the Austrians by surprise. The battle took place on August 19, 1691 near the village of Slankamen. Despite the numerical advantage and the effect of surprise, luck turned away from the Ottoman army, which was defeated in battle, and the Grand Vizier himself died. The remnants of the Ottoman army, leaving artillery and treasury, hastily retreated to Belgrade and took up defense in the city. There was a temporary lull in the war, during which the Austrians concentrated their forces in Petrovaradin, which was located near Belgrade. At the same time, the main forces of the Austrians were involved in the war against France, so they did not attempt to capture Belgrade. In 1695, the Ottoman Sultan Ahmed II died and Mustafa II took his place, who firmly decided to return the territories occupied by the Austrians. Taking advantage of the fact that the main forces of the Holy Roman Empire were bogged down in battles with the army of the French king, the Ottomans were able to inflict a number of defeats on the Austrian troops, but nevertheless they failed to drive the enemy out of Transylvania. On April 18, 1697, Mustafa II, at the head of a 100,000th army, began a campaign intending to regain control over the territories occupied by the Austrians. On August 11, 1697, the Ottoman army reached the outskirts of Belgrade, and on August 18, it set out on a campaign to drive the Austrians out of Petrovaradin and thereby get rid of the threat of an Austrian attack on Belgrade. Meanwhile, the 70,000-strong Austrian army under the command of Prince Eugene of Savoy hurried to help the defenders of Petrovaradin. When the Austrian army reached Petrovaradin, they found the Ottoman army in the vicinity of the city. The Austrians began to maneuver, as they planned to start a battle with the Ottomans in such a place that artillery from Petrovaradin would reach the enemy. In turn, the Ottomans figured out the enemy's plan and also began to maneuver in order to start a battle in a convenient place for themselves. The maneuvers of the two armies continued until September, when the Ottomans decided to leave the vicinity of Petrovaradin and start moving along the Tisza River in order to reach the fortress of Szeged and take it by storm. In turn, the Austrians under the command of Eugene of Savoy began to move after the enemy, but at the same time kept a distance from him. It should be noted that the Ottomans did not know exactly where the enemy was, while the Serbian light cavalry, which was in the service of the Austrians, constantly monitored the Sultan's army. Some time later, the Serbian horsemen managed to capture an Ottoman officer from whom they were able to learn that the Sultan was planning to cross the river and take his army to Temesvar for the winter. On September 11, 1697, the Ottoman army began crossing the Tisza River near the village of Zenta. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, almost the entire Ottoman cavalry led by the Sultan, as well as all the artillery, managed to move to the opposite bank of the Tisza River. Since the Ottomans had a long crossing ahead, they began to build defensive structures, but before they could complete the work, they noticed the approaching imperial army led by Eugene of Savoy. To take the enemy by surprise, the Austrian army made a 10-hour forced march and was ready to immediately join the battle. Arriving at the crossing point of the Ottoman army, Eugene of Savoy noticed that the enemy did not have time to complete the construction of the defensive line on the right flank. Deciding that it was difficult to come up with a more opportune moment for an attack, Eugene of Savoy ordered his army to form battle formations and prepare for the start of the battle. Placing the infantry in the center and the cavalry on the flanks, the Austrian army launched an assault on the Ottoman camp. The Austrian cavalry on the left flank attacked the enemy first, which planned to break into the Ottoman camp through a gap in its fortifications with a swift blow. The Ottoman infantry met the attacking Austrian cavalry with heavy musket fire and forced them to retreat. At this moment, the Austrian infantry reached the gap in the Ottoman fortifications and tied the enemy in battle, allowing their cavalry to regroup. Very soon, a bloody battle ensued around the perimeter of the Ottoman camp. The Ottomans offered fierce resistance, but when the Austrian cavalry returned to battle, the right flank of the Ottoman began to back away. The Grand Vizier, who commanded the defense of the camp, understood that the position of his army was rapidly deteriorating. Therefore, he sent the cavalry detachments in reserve to attack, so that they would drive the enemy away from the gap into the fortifications on the right flank. The attacking Ottoman cavalry was met with dense rifle fire and bogged down in hand-to-hand combat, unable to turn the tide of the battle on the right flank. The Austrians, holding back the blow of the Ottoman cavalry, continued to push the enemy. To strengthen the onslaught, Eugene of Savoy sent additional infantry units from the center to the left flank of his army. Having received reinforcements, the left flank of the Austrian army, intensifying the onslaught, broke through the enemy defenses and was able to get almost close to the crossing. At that moment, the Austrian artillery, which had been bombarding the Ottoman camp throughout the battle, managed to destroy the bridge. It should be mentioned that along with the bridge, the Ottoman troops on it were destroyed. The news that the only escape route had been destroyed caused panic among the defenders of the Ottoman camp. Very soon, the Ottomans remaining in the camp surrendered, and the Sultan, realizing that the battle was lost, ordered the remnants of his army to hastily retreat. Since it was already beginning to get dark, Eugene of Savoy decided not to pursue the enemy. It should be mentioned that in the Battle of Zenta, the Ottoman army lost about 30,000 soldiers killed and captured, as well as most of its artillery, so the Sultan simply did not have the strength to continue the war against the Holy Roman Empire. In turn, the Holy Roman Empire, thanks to the victory over the Ottomans, and also due to the fact that the War of the League of Augsburg ended in 1697, had the necessary forces in order to continue the offensive deep into the Ottoman Empire. But at the same time, Leopold I was well aware that the childless King of Spain, Charles II, would die very soon, and therefore a new war with France would certainly begin. That is why it was decided to start peace talks. On January 26, 1699, the Treaty of Karlowitz was concluded, under the terms of which the Ottoman Empire recognized the transfer of all Hungary and Transylvania under the rule of Leopold I. This ended the Great Turkish War. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell so as not to miss new videos.